Postmodern Art Podcast, a podcast dedicated to giving artists who are wide the world over the platform they deserve. I am your host, Nathan Ragland, and for today's episode, I present you an artist that is presenting something absolutely unique, scary, creepy, fun, all of the above. So with this conversation, I'm going to say, enter, if you dare. Today's guest is Sky, better known as SkellyBonesArt, a comic artist and illustrator whose iconic art style and spooky stories can be shown on full display in such webcomics such as Idlewood Asylum. Sky is someone that I recently discovered thanks to, ironically enough, Portfolio Day, which shows how important it is for you guys to get yourself out there. But regardless, I instantly fell in love with the art style that she had to present, and I knew I had to have her on the podcast as soon as I can. So, thankfully, we had the conversation that I present you guys today. If you enjoy Sky, make sure you support her with the links down in the description below. If you enjoy the podcast, make sure you like, share, subscribe, or follow whatever audio streaming platform you prefer. Leave 5 stars wherever you can. You know, I see that stuff, you know, it genuinely warms my heart. If you want to go a little further with that support, man, I recommend you check out the merch shop at fourthwall.com. Link to that is in the description below. We have some fantastic designs as done by some amazing artists, including the incredible logo design as done by Roshan Galaxy, and I think you would look fantastic in it today. But now, without further ado, please enjoy the Postmodern Art Podcast. Seriously though, thank you for taking the opportunity to do this. I'm not gonna lie, I took today, like, just catching up on, like, all your stuff, like, reading, Idlewood Asylum and such, and, like, fuck, that shit's good. Like,
Thank you.
like, I knew I was confident, like, asking you to be on the podcast or whatnot, but, like, reading that webcomic, it's like, oh, I got a fucking banger of an episode coming up. Let's go.
Thank you.
I cannot wait to talk about that, because I can only imagine the amount of thought you've probably put into that, seeing how much you have put into that.
Oh yeah. It's quite a lot of influences, quite a lot of detail that goes into it.
I can tell, honestly, just based on all the different characters and, like, their dynamics alone. And yeah, like, I can tell there's a lot that goes into it. Goodness. Let's see. Just making sure I got my thing set. I'm putting my phone on silent to make sure I don't hear a random buzzing in the background. Let's see.
I did the same.
Beautiful. Wonderful. Oh, you requested to follow me back on Twitter, even though I never... Well, I should probably respond back to that. I'm trying to use less of that because obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But
I said I was going to use less of it, and then I realized that most of my followers are on there, and
yeah.
Unfortunately,
I will say I feel like looking at where I am on both platforms, on Twitter and then on Blue Sky, because I've been using Blue Sky a lot more. I've developed, like, a good chunk of my base back, I will say. Like, I think I got, like, over 1,000 followers on Twitter. Meanwhile, on Blue Sky, I've already, like, gotten close to 600. So, like, I'm not hurting too badly, you know.
I've got nearly 1,000 on Twitter, and I don't even have 150 on Blue Sky, so I'm struggling to back that following.
It's a struggle, I will tell you that much. It's always, I mean, it's gonna be a struggle one way or another, building up any sort of, like, social media following. It took me until recently to get 2,000 subs on YouTube. All right, and that's a whole entire Herculean task on its own.
I've been doing art and all that for years, and I'm not even at 1,000 yet. So we're trying to get up there. It's a struggle.
Well, hopefully the episode we're about to record gets you a little bit further to that point, because you absolutely fucking deserve it.
Oh my god.
Trust me. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was gonna say, I hope I deserve it. I mean, I try my best.
I was gonna say, like, just based on, like, your art style alone, like I said, like, that was the thing that initially just sold me, because I love that, like, grungy, like, sharp angle, like, punk aesthetic that you have going on with, like, some of your art or whatnot. Like, I crave that stuff. I love, like, the roughness about it, but also, like, how polished it kind of looks, if you kind of get what I'm getting at.
Yeah, no, at least that's exactly what I go for. Just grunge punk aesthetic that's just very much inspired by like 2000s like horror art, classic horror art.
There you go.
But I'm also very much a perfectionist. I polish everything I do just because it's very impossible for me to do just a sketch or line art.
Yeah.
I need a full finished piece, or it's not good.
It's literally all or nothing. I get that mentality.
You can see that with my comic. I see other web comics that just do black and white line art and all that. I'm like, if it does not have full backgrounds and full shading and full color,
right,
it's not released. It has to be 100% perfect.
And that's why your hiatuses, when you take them, are justified. Trust me.
Oh yeah, no, my hiatuses are long ones, especially with this upcoming chapter that's going a lot bigger with what I typically do. So I'm excited for it, but like, yeah, it's a lot. Especially doing it by myself, it's a lot.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I'll be like, I'll say you're not the first webcomic artist I've had on this podcast, and I've had like a good couple that have a very similar mentality. It reminds me of one that I had on not too long ago named Claire, who does a webcomic called Phantom Marine. I don't know if you had a chance to check out that webcomic or whatnot, but like, I'll send it to you because it's a gorgeous comic on its own. But like, especially whenever she goes all in on certain things and go all in on certain details, it's like stuff that you would expect like professional comic books and like graphic novels to have. So like, you know, that again, that all or nothing mentality of like making sure that the details are quite right, and especially with like the breaks that she takes for that kind of stuff. I think she only recently just came back from her most recent hiatus, like late December or whatnot. So
yeah. I definitely have a mentality of, I keep being told, oh, you shouldn't put so much effort into your pages because people are only going to look at it for a little bit. But like, I want the little bit they spend looking at it to be memorable. I want them to see something. I want them to see some incredible art that makes them want to come back and look at it again.
There you go. You know, I just realized Exactly. I was gonna say, I realized I told you about that webcomic, and I realized I got one of the plushies from that webcomic sitting right behind me. This is Jeff. He's a god of evil or god of death. So if that doesn't convince you otherwise, I don't know what will.
I hope to one day get plushies of Idlewood. That would be nice.
Oh, that would be really cool, especially if you get like ones of like Mooney alone would probably be a big seller just because.
Mooney is my favorite character. The next chapter is actually about her, right. And I've always wanted a plushie of her specifically. She's my favorite. I know I shouldn't have favorites of my characters, but she's my favorite.
I'll tell you what, we'll definitely talk about that and then some more here in a bit. Do you have any questions or concerns before we really do get this show on the road?
Nothing that I can think of. This is the first podcast I've been a guest on.
Oh.
I do run my own podcast, but like this is my first time on someone else's. So.
Well, why didn't you invite me on your podcast? How dare? No, I'm joking.
I don't know if it's exactly. I don't know if it's your speed or not. It's a podcast I run with my friend where we basically review and talk about childhood, like children's horror media.
Ooh, interesting. Send me a link to that podcast because I at least want to check it out. That does sound like really cool.
We still need to record more episodes, but we've had a few episodes. One about R.L. Stein's The Haunting Hour, which was on...
Yes.
Which was the show, the movie that was on Cartoon Network.
Right.
Bell in it. We had... we reviewed Making Fiends from Nicktoons Network.
Oh my god, I used to love that show.
And then we reviewed the... both of the Halloween episodes from the Sweet Life series from Disney Channel.
This, like, you got it. I will say, if I could ever be a guest on a podcast, this is one I would like to, because I like talking about like the weird, macabre, you know, like kids horror stuff more than anything else.
We are planning our next episode. We haven't recorded it yet. We're planning our next episode to be about Curse of the Were-Rabbit because of the recent Wallace and Gromit movie.
If you need another person on hand, drag me in. I am in there like swimwear. Okay, that I love that.
We could probably try and fit you in.
Okay, awesome. I would greatly appreciate that if you will allow me. Don't let me bump in on your space. Trust me, because
we're planning a few episodes that are like guest episodes. One we're planning is I have a friend that's a big Twitter user that is known for being in the Goosebumps fandom, and we're planning an episode with her reviewing Goosebumps books and all that.
Not even just Goosebump books. Sometimes some of the Goosebumps like show, like the TV show, like they had some episodes that were like above and beyond there.
We were thinking about doing an episode about which episodes of Goosebumps were adapted the books the best.
Right. Okay. No, that's valid.
Like
That's cool.
some episodes were really bad when adapting the books, and some episodes adapted it so well that it like scared people for years. So we were going to go into that.
And what is this podcast called by chance?
Childhood Nightmares.
Childhood Nightmares. Okay. If it's okay with you, like I said, I am recording this little intro bit. I'm gonna include this little bit that we just talked about right there to help promote that, because I want you guys to get more people to listen to that, because that sounds fun.
I appreciate it. Okay. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, Sky. Before we really do get going, I must first ask you the icebreaker question of the podcast, if I may. Let's say you get to go to a desert island on your own accords. It's just you alone with your thoughts. You get to kick back, relax, breathe, to truly enjoy yourself for a little bit. With accommodations, it's not like a desert island in the middle. It's like a little personal B&B paradise away from society for however long you want to be there. To make sure you don't go completely insane on this island, you could bring one piece of media or one piece of art with you to help with whatever kind of headspace you want on this island. If given this opportunity, what would that one piece be?
You know, I feel like there's something specific that I'm having in my life.
Look, I wasn't going to be one.
If people can't see this, I have an entire corner. Let's say Beetlejuice.
See, I wasn't going to be the one to assume, because, you know, but also like when the neon light's flashing right in your face, sometimes that's the obvious answer. What is it about Beetlejuice that makes that like the immediate thing for you?
Oh, so when I was growing up watching the movie, it was like just the creativity of it. Mm-hmm. I always grew up with like anxiety and fear and all that. So just something that took fear and made a joke out of it really just stuck with me. I loved it. And then it's not even just the movie. Like the cartoon is so creative. The musical is so creative. The theme park experiences are so creative. Literally all of these different elements of this kooky, weird, just out of shape little horror comedy series is just so wonderful. And then it's also just a thing of when the pandemic was going on, and we were all just kind of trying to keep it together, the thing that kept me together the most was the musical. So just Beetlejuice as a whole is not only just really helpful for me as a person, but also inspired me creatively. Like a lot of my art is just inspired by this colorful, weird shaped little beast that is the Beetlejuice franchise. Just weird shapes, weird colors, weird characters that all know they're weird, and none of them judge each other for it. They're just trying to make it on their own. And I really love that in a franchise.
I mean, especially with how far that it has kind of gone from being just a simple film from, you know, what was it, 89, early 90s or whatnot, like from 88, my bad. Thank you for correcting me. No, seriously. But like what started off as something as simple as that, like the way that the momentum just kind of kept going, and like that fandom stayed strong to where like it had the, like you said, the animated TV series. When the musical came out, it was an instant hit to the point to where we had that sequel like just last year, and it was fantastic. It was wonderful. Me and my girlfriend saw that. It wasn't as good as the original, obviously, but like for a sequel, like I felt like
I have my opinions on the sequel that I will keep my mouth shut about. But let's just say to anyone who's listening, me as a massive Beetlejuice fan, that movie was garbage.
I'll at least say that, like, for what could have been a sequel, especially for one that was, you know, over 30 years past when the original one first showcased or whatnot, like, it did a fun job. It was fun more than anything else.
It was fun, and it was a very visually gorgeous movie, and I'll give it that.
Yes.
But there were definitely a lot of writing issues.
Yep.
There was just a lot of things that, based on my love for the original, they changed some character dynamics, and I was like, get this out of here. Well, then again, Tim Burton did say he had not seen the movie since the movie came out, the first movie since it came out. So I was like, I
maybe a
think you should
refresher could have been
rewatch
nice.
the movie.
Maybe
You
a
probably should have rewatched the movie.
yeah, like I said, maybe a refresher would have been just nice, just to get your head in the right space more than anything else. But I mean,
He's like, oh, Beetlejuice is in love with Lydia. Okay, I need you to rewatch the movie real quick. Just real quick for me. Thanks.
goodness.
I think you got something wrong there, but okay.
I will also say I find it a little bit ironic though that like you said during the pandemic, one of the things that kept you comforted was the whole big dead thing.
Oh yeah, no, literally, it's such a hopeful musical, despite
Yes.
the fact that it's a show about death. That I'm just like, I couldn't be helped by and be enamored by it. I was like, this is such a weird, macabre little musical, but it's also about a desire to stay alive and a desire to find things in your life that care about you, which is wild considering, him.
Yeah, consider the following. But regardless, Beetlejuice, that is your answer. You're locking that in.
Yeah, locking it in.
Then, if that's the case, I cannot think of a better way to start the Postmodern Art Podcast. Welcome, everyone. I am your host, Nathan Ragland. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, or follow whatever audio streaming platform you prefer. You would look fantastic in the merch we have at the merch shop, fourthwall.com. Link to that is in the description below. And follow us on Blue Sky, Instagram, and most social media platforms at Postmod Art Pod for future updates and guest announcements, including today's guest. She is a comic artist and illustrator whose iconic art style and spooky stories are shown on full display in her art. Welcome to the podcast, Sky, aka SkellyBonesArt.
Good to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here more than anything else. How are you doing today, Sky?
I'm doing pretty okay, just being invited on a podcast.
Well, absolutely. Trust me, whenever I saw your stuff on the recent portfolio day, I knew you were in an instant. I had to have you on the podcast as soon as I possibly could. And I am so glad to finally get the opportunity, especially diving more deep into your stuff and seeing kind of the cool stuff that you've been able to present. Like I said, I knew when I asked, it was a slam dunk. Reinforcing it more than anything else with what I was able to read and such, this is going to be a fun episode and I just know it. But before we talk about the stuff you're doing nowadays, I want to go back just a little bit and learn more or less the origin story of Sky, if I may. What got you interested in art and illustration and such in the first place?
When I was younger, I used to read a lot of comics and all that, but something I specifically did a lot was I didn't go outside a lot. Didn't have a lot of friends, so I would sit down and watch just cartoons just all day. And the crazy thing is, if you watch cartoons all day, you catch a lot of the cartoons that nobody else watched.
Right.
Because you just spend all your time watching that. So I'd catch random cartoons on Nicktoons Network or 6 a.m. Cartoon Network, or just all these different cartoons that had these distinct visual styles and this distinct voice to it that just... I was sitting there just being a little kid, just stuck in my room, and I would just find so much joy in seeing these weird, strange, interesting characters and their distinct styles. And I'd start just recreating it on just little pieces of paper. And as I read more and I watched more, I just wanted to make it myself. That's all I wanted to do. Just make things. Just to write stories like they did.
I mean, that's extremely valid. Do you remember some of those early cartoons that grabbed your attention or whatnot? And it's just what in the world are you presenting?
If I had to go for normal, everyday cartoons, Chowder,
yes,
classic SpongeBob, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. I didn't watch that much Disney cartoons growing up. That's the weird thing. But then I caught a lot of things like Invader Zim, and Courage the Cowardly Dog, and making and Edgar and Ellen and all that. These spooky little cartoons that just had these weird auras to them, and I was so in love with those. I was enamored by just this creepy little weird side of children's media that I was just blown away by. I saw horror movies and all that, and like it wasn't for kids. But then there's these little things for kids that were for kids, but they were just messed up.
Yes.
Respectfully, pardon my French, fucked up beyond belief. Like they had some really fucked up things on like Cartoon Network and all that, and Nickelodeon. Like watching Invader Zim, you're like, oh, it's alongside SpongeBob. Where are his eyeballs?
Why is there an episode where they're turning into baloney for some reason? Like,
I loved Invader Zim and Making Fiends and Courage and all that. Just these creepy little cartoons that just had these really distinct art styles. Like they would change art styles to fit their like messed up things. I loved Billy and Mandy because I loved its
yes.
quirky sense of humor. Like it wasn't just like, oh, randomness for the sake of randomness. It was just a weird sense of humor, like dark humor. And I loved that. Like it was colorful, but it was dark. And I loved seeing that. Just dark but colorful.
Absolutely. I was going to say, thank you for saying that. Shout out to former guest of the podcast, Maxwell Adams, for providing that. Yes, I've had Maxwell Adams on this podcast. I can gloat. I can. Oh, trust me. Seeing some of your interests, there's a good bit of overlap that we have with each other, I will say. On top of that, person I've had on the podcast twice, Will Wood. So there you go. Yeah.
You're talking to a queer autistic person. You just struck gold. You said
Oh,
Maxwell Adams and Will Wood in the same paragraph.
yes. Yes,
I
I
don't know
have.
what I'm doing here.
Well, you're doing it here because you've done some fantastic art based on those like early inspirations, especially like the horror stuff, which is the stuff that I instantly noticed. Like the more I seem to absorb, like more of your own art as well. What is it about horror in particular that just like that roped you in and like really wanted you to embrace more of that unique world?
See, that's an interesting one. When I was growing up, you know, diagnosed with anxiety, blah blah blah, and everything in life scared me.
Okay.
But horror was like the one thing that was scary, but you could control it. You could control when you experienced it. And I
Right.
thought that was just wonderful, just being able to feel fear without having to actually have anything to fear, you know? And then as I got more into horror movies, just because it was that sense of control, it started to become more of a thing of I loved the aesthetics.
Yes.
I loved just this dark, brooding atmosphere. I loved watching like old horror movies that had like this like classic Scooby-Doo that had this very like weird painterly aesthetic that had this spooky nature to it, weird shapes and all that. And I loved that. I loved watching like slasher films and just how they pulled everything together. I
Mm-hmm.
liked watching classic horror comedies like Beetlejuice, Gremlins, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, just colorful and bright, but also really dark. And I loved that aesthetic. Just this weird, just dark aesthetic that could still have fun with what it's doing. That's one thing I love about horror movies. More horror movies often than not are fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if they're scary, they're fun. That's why like theme parks like Universal and all that have like Halloween Horror Nights because it's just, it's dark but it's fun and I love that. I love how you can experience different conditions of like human nature through horror. You can also just have fun with it. It doesn't have to be serious, but you can make it serious if you want, which is something that's hard to do with most things. Like, it's hard to do that with comedy. You can, but it's harder to do. But horror, it's so easy just to explore different aspects just through aesthetics alone.
Right, right. At least when it comes to the aesthetic aspect, that's I feel like horror has the leg up when it comes to that compared to comedy or whatnot. I will say, and you can. This is something that I talked about. I had been taught in film school when I went there. At least when it comes to like how they play out, horror and comedy in a way are kind of one and the same as kind of like setup, punchline, reaction more than anything else. Whether it be set up to a joke, deliver the punchline, audience laugh, or set up to a situation, possibly punch, if not a knife to the face, characters react with blood splattered on their face or something along the lines of that.
It's very similar concept. It's just playing in a different field, I guess. Like, I think both are hard to do,
Oh,
to be
absolutely.
honest. Like, horror, you need to know how to subvert the audience. You need to know how to play to their expectations and play against their expectations. Comedy, you do the exact same thing. You just have to know how to land the joke. It's easy to land a scare because you could just easily do a jump scare, but it's hard to land a joke. That's why I think horror comedies are some of my favorites, just because the idea of having to land the scare and land the joke at the same time is just a feat of strength that I fall in love with, that I cannot believe is done the way it's done. Like, there are some horror comedies that like are on my like top 10 list that I'm just like, I cannot believe that they were able to pull this off.
Right. I mean, I know you mentioned like Beetlejuice. I noticed another one that you seem to have a major affinity to as well is Ghostbusters as well. The way that they kind
Oh,
of blend the horror and the comedy aspect with what they're doing.
big Ghostbusters fan. Like, if I can.
Oh, that is sick. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so I'm very much a big Ghostbusters fan. Grew up with that, loved it. Me and my dad used to watch the Ghostbusters movies and the real Ghostbusters and all that all the time. I fell in love with that franchise. It's just so goofy, so fun, but just I love the practical effects. I love the aesthetics, but also I don't know, I love the characters. The characters play so well off of each other, but they're playing in a horror environment. I love it so much.
It's almost like just like if you were to have your casual friend group going into like a haunted house or whatnot, because there's gonna be times, depending on how your friend group is, where you're just gonna be cutting up and you're gonna be saying silly stuff to each other. But like when things get real, they get real quick.
Like, the dynamic I love is they're all making fun of each other. They're friends, but they're teasing each other
Right.
until something scary comes along, and suddenly they're just pushing each other in the way to get away from it. And I think that's a really funny dynamic for Ghostbusters.
Is a great dynamic, and it's a reason why it's been so beloved after all these years more than anything else.
Yeah, I'm happy to this day that there are still movies coming out and there's still new things coming out for Ghostbusters. Because like I like that there's new stuff. I like seeing more of it.
Absolutely, and I can imagine like with a bunch of that, with all the stuff that we talked about, previously, especially the horror aspect or whatnot. That's something that you have taken and absorbed and done with your own kind of stuff. So it leads me to wonder, when did it go from just like this general love and appreciation for the arts, for these obscure animations, for the horror aspect? When did it go from like a love and appreciation for that and a passion and wanting to make it your career?
It happened years ago. I got into animation, and for a while I was just making like silly flash animations, and I made that for a while. Don't ask me what it was because I'm never gonna say it out loud. I'm not gonna let anyone see that. But no, I loved it. But for a while, I kept adding horror elements to it.
Okay.
I was making flash animations because I saw flash animations and I was like, haha, I could do that. But then I started coming up with more story ideas that I felt like genuinely interested in. And I started drawing comics that I felt genuinely interested in. And then when I started adding horror aspects, I was like, I'm having a lot of fun crafting this. I'm having a lot of fun putting the pieces together. Eventually, I lost passion for animation because animation is hard.
Yes, it is.
That's the end of the sentence. But I had never really considered doing comics full time until just recently, a few years ago.
Okay.
I was like very much in the animation, like I was like animation or nothing. But then I started like practicing comics and all that. Idlewood was actually my first like full length comic, because like I was just like, I don't know how to get this idea out. I made a animated teaser for Idlewood back in 2020.
Okay.
It was like a 2.5, maybe 3 minute teaser that was fully animated. And I was like, I enjoyed making this, but this took like 3 months to make. It was a lot of effort and more would take more and I'd have to hire actors and all that. I want to tell this story, but I don't know how to tell it within my budget, within my time. I don't know how to do that. And I started practicing comics more and more. And I was like, maybe I can attempt something. So I started putting together tests and like doing concept art and all that. And I found that I really liked how it looked. It felt very much to me like I was doing like classic pulp comics, like back in like the 50s and 60s, like classic horror pulp comics or something akin to like 2000s like Dark Horse comics, like things like Johnny the Homicidal Maniac and Emily the Strange and all that. Just these creepy little comics that had these weird atmospheres to them. I was getting this like rush just creating stuff, and I was like, I think I want to actually sit down and make this.
There you go.
So I started developing the first chapter. I released it all on Webtoon, and I started getting a bit of a response to it. They were like, this is a really cool idea. So I kept going. I was like, I want to keep developing this. I want to see where it can go. And now I'm 8 chapters in, and I think I'm having a good time with it. I like making comics a lot. I have so many ideas for different stories, different comics that I want to make now, because I'm just like, comics I think is now my like line of work. It's like the thing I want to do, because like it's what I'm good at, I think, at this point. Illustration and comic writing and all that, I think that's what I'm really good at this point. Animation, it can stay over there, but I'm fine.
We might cross that bridge if we get to it at some point, but for now, like, you're enjoying the lane that you're in when it comes to making comics and such. I did want to know, what was it about, like, how did you first discover, like, web comics, and what made you want to go down that, well, I mean, we know why you want to go down that path, but, like, how did you discover it in the first place?
I had been reading webcomics forever. Okay. Like, I loved reading graphic novels and all that, but webcomics were free.
Yeah.
There were quite a few webcomics I read on one of the websites I used for Idlewood called Comic Fury. But then eventually I found like Webtoon and Tapas, and I started reading comics on there, and I became so invested in like the characters and how with a webcomic you can just keep going. You can really develop the characters without any limits to amount of pages. And I really, really loved that. I loved reading webcomics. And I just think that like one thing I noticed with webcomics that's like so different from comic books these days is webtoon artists and webcomic artists seem to be so good at creating like composition. One of my favorite things about comics is the composition, how you can make one panel blend into the next, or how you can make everything fit together. And I noticed that webcomic artists were so good at that. And then like superhero comic writers were getting worse at that because it was just bare bones. It's just trying to follow the comic story. And I was like, I want to see more like composition. I want to see more interesting page design and all that. I loved that. And I think when I finally came to writing my webcomic, I was like, I think if I'm going to write a comic, I want to write what I would have read in like middle school or high school, something that personally would have appealed to me the most. I feel like you can't really write a comic for other people because like if you're not if you wouldn't read this comic, then what's the point in making it?
Right. That's a good valuable, that's a good thing to, a good mentality to have with just about any person that wants to get into kind of like art in general, or like go into like a creative field in some sort. Like if you're not creating the stuff that you personally would have wanted either years ago or what you want right now, then like why are you in the field in the first place? That's why I made this podcast in the first place, because I love getting this like behind the scenes stuff when it comes to artists and like getting to learn and love more about what they're doing, why they have this passion for this kind of stuff.
So like you're like, oh, well, yeah, you guys can listen to my podcast, but this is for me. I'm just trying to get some behind the scenes stuff.
You're joking about that, but that's kind of what it is. Like, I get to talk to cool people and, like, get kind of a chance to kind of pick at their brain for, like, an hour or so to kind of get, like, the cool little insight of their stuff. Meanwhile, for other people, like, you know, they could do the same thing while also being like, okay, that's how this person got to be where they are. That's honestly insightful. Maybe that's something I should consider in my own little creative art journey. And that's cool to think about. That's cool to know more than anything else, that people can come away taking that kind of stuff. It's cool to know that for you, like you said, like you decided to go into making webcomics, into this creative field, to create the stuff that you would have read years ago in middle and high school and such. So that leads me to wonder, obviously, the big thing that you have been able to develop, the one that is out there and really gives us a good insight into the kind of stuff you would have loved to see, which is Idlewood Asylum. Now I'm curious, we know how we got to making the webcomic, but I'm wondering, how did the webcomic come to be? How did you develop this concept for Idlewood Asylum?
Okay, so that's a very fun story. So again, the whole story is about like haunted houses and all that. Like not like being haunted, but like the idea of people running a house that scares people.
Mm-hmm.
I used to work for Universal in Orlando. I used to work like food and beverage and all that. And at a time, back in 2019, I was working there and I went to the break room and I saw some of the scare actors in costume just kind of chatting, just eating, chatting, just having a grand old time. And I just loved the idea of just real life monsters just kind of chatting, just like imagining like Dracula and Frankenstein's monster just kind of chilling, just talking about stuff. So when I was developing ideas and all that, I developed an idea for like real life monsters just kind of being in a haunted house. It wasn't like at time like haunted houses, like haunt events or anything. It was just monsters in a house just kind of chilling, just having a little party to themselves. But I got more into the idea of I've never seen like media other than like certain horror movies like approach the idea of haunted houses, of like scare actors, of like what it takes to go into that and like create Halloween events and all that. So I got into this idea of monsters doing their own haunt event just for the sake of it.
Right.
When I first started it, like when I first started developing the idea, it was a lot darker. It was like actually like horror straight up. It was not comedy or anything. It was just horror. But as I developed it more, I was like, I really like the idea of this just being a comedy. Like instead of being like, oh, they're luring people in, it's just a workplace comedy where they're just kind of doing it to pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's their entire motivation for it, just paying bills. But they have the power to just do whatever they want, but they don't. They're just doing it to pay the bills, and that's the end of the story. And I liked the concept of that. It was a nice, funny concept that I could roll with. Just different supernatural creatures just kind of doing their thing.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like seeing how you've been able to execute it so far in the 7 chapters you presented or whatnot. Like, you've done a really good job really putting that idea out there. And like, I could kind of see the certain aspects in the beginning where I could have seen you go down the complete horror route, especially after the first little chapter, like the prologue or whatnot. Like, you could have taken that thing, you could have taken it straight to horror, like, and no one would have questioned it more than anything else. But to see how it more or less evolved into more of this like fun horror comedy workplace, aspect or whatnot, like, it is really well done more than anything else. I appreciate the writing that you have with it. I appreciate the writing that you have with it, and especially the characters you've more or less developed like for this concept. Like, how hard was it for you to develop all the different characters that you have for this fun, fantastic story?
It was really hard, but it was really hard to decide which monsters were going to be in there and what they were. Like, I didn't want to play characters as, just, oh, they're mean or they're grouchy. I didn't want to play characters as in they're just like their movie counterparts. I very much wanted to develop each character based on things you would see in a haunted house. Like, if you went to a haunted house, like at a local place, what kind of characters would you see? I started developing characters based on that. And then personalities kind of just developed based around the designs themselves.
Okay.
Like, certain characters got a bit of like a fluffier design or like a bit of a cuter design, so they got a bit of a nicer like personality. And that only just came from me sketching characters over and over and over again, trying to figure out, what do I want them to look like? Like, what is this character supposed to be? Because like, there are certain characters that are like, there's a character that's like a neon demon, and I was like, what exactly do I want to do with this character? Like, what do I want to represent with this character? Like, I loved the development of different colors, so I just decided to develop something where the character has different voices based on each of the colors.
Right.
I had a werewolf. werewolves are typically very feral, so I liked the idea of just making it more of like a domestic character, like a wild puppy. Like that character's one of my favorites just because the character is just wild and just kind of untamed, but very much just as lovable and just likes affection. And I
Yes.
like aspects like that, taking subverting the ideas you have about different monsters and just making it something pure, but also allowing the spooky elements to still thrive in that environment. Because like I can't forget the aspects of horror in the horror comedy.
Right.
It was a it was a very big balancing act between the two of wanting to create these actually likable characters and then having to make them genuinely scary in moments and find reasons to make them scary despite their polite demeanors.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, especially with the way you have been able to present them, whether it be like like I said, the glow demon or whatnot, with like how it seems like on some aspects they could be fun based on the fact of like, hey, glowing lights, different colors, but then like having them as like this tall, brooding character or whatnot, this seems to have something hidden more or less underneath. And meanwhile, like you were talking about, you have Mooney, where she could be a feral werewolf beast or whatnot, but like I said, it's more like a feral puppy more than anything else. And absolutely, or I'm gonna butcher this one's name, but Sangui or Sangui.
Anyways,
Sanguis. Okay, I didn't know if it was like a special thing given
uh,
the realm.
sanguis is Latin for the word blood.
Ah, there you. Yep, like it mentioned in the
And
thing.
yeah, I was trying to find a name, and I was like, oh, that's the cute that's a name that does not sound menacing or anything. It sounds kind of like a cute little foreign name, and then it's just it's blood.
Yep.
That's all it is.
Meanwhile, like again, like when Sanguis is not in like just standard like standard mode or whatnot, like it's just a cool guy, nice little smile all the time or whatnot. But as soon as you get into that haunted house mode or whatnot, the again tall brooding character over like shadowy presence more than anything else, like ready to strike at almost any moment, more or less. Like it's a fun balancing act between the two more than anything else.
I think that's kind of why I think the characters in my head are endearing because it's proven in the haunted house segments that they are scarier and worse than they seem. But the fact that they don't go down that avenue is what's endearing about it. That they could be like violent or just terrifying, but they're not really doing it for any malicious reasons. They're just regular people.
Yeah. Well, people.
People. I think that's a lot of the concept behind the characters. Just the idea that a big part of Idlewood for me was making every character basically queer. I had to be like, they're all gay, they're all trans, they are all some flavor of it. And it's just a lot of this, and I think it fits really well now with just political climates and all that, everyone demonizing people and thinking we're monsters. It's the idea that these characters are literally monsters, but they don't want to be seen that way.
Right.
Like they're only doing this haunted house simply because it's a necessity. Simply like being in the closet is a necessity. You have to play to certain strengths or certain ideas of yourself simply to survive. Right. And that started a lot during this was being developed during the last presidential campaign. So it was a lot of developing it around that concept, just characters struggling to survive, but doing it together. And I liked that idea of unity. These characters that are different, but they're the same. They're the same because they have the same struggles and they're all coming together despite their differences. And I liked creating that concept, especially since it worked so well in a horror environment, which is just really weird.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's such a unique and such a deep concept. Like, I can't imagine anyone having to go through that kind of thing in real life, especially in today's climate, Oh, wait, hi. I can only imagine how much for you it was both, really easy, but also really hard for you to translate that kind of mentality into these fun characters, into this unique story.
Yeah, no, it was definitely it was definitely a soul searching sort of thing where you had to really consider everything you had been through and put it into the characters. But I wanted to put a sense of hope into it. That's one thing I love about horror as well. Just there's a lot of hope to it despite all the hopelessness.
Right.
Like a hope that you're going to make it out, a hope that you're going to survive. That's what Idlewood is, but instead of the survivors, the victims being the ones hoping to survive, it's the monsters. And I think that's a good subversion of the concept.
It honestly really is. And I think another thing that helps when it comes to translating that kind of mentality or whatnot is just how you're able to present it, namely your art style. I said it before, but like the art style that you have with this and just your art in general and whatnot, I love how you're like it was the main reason why I wanted to talk to you in the first place. Your art style is something that I've rarely seen out there, but like I love kind of the way you present this kind of like rough, jagged, but yet almost like a perfection, kind of like a punk aesthetic when it comes to just both this comic, but also just about anything that you'd be able to present. How did you more or less develop that style? Like, how did that become like your natural way to draw stuff?
I used to draw a lot softer when I
Okay.
was like a teenager, but I developed my style a lot more after like classic Jonan Vasquez art, like Invader Zim or Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, or classic Tim Burton art. Um, but also just a lot of like 2000s art that had that sharp style to it that went on for a while. I just loved the style. There was something about just how satisfying it felt. But a big part of it was I like drawing with shapes. I
Yes.
don't like I don't like just trying to draw a character and it just is a character. I like the idea that a character is made of shapes. A character is made of shapes that all work together and flow into each other to create a character and create the silhouette and to create this creature, this character, this whatever. That's what I saw a lot in like 2000s cartoons and all that, and like with Jonan Vasquez and Tim Burton, just a lot of shapes, and just flowing into each other. And I can't draw a character without just making it a shape. Like I need the character to be made of shapes because it feels the most satisfying to look at when you see the shapes come together and just form something that's so natural to look at.
Yeah.
And so when you draw with just shapes, it turns out that it just turns out a lot more jagged, which some people are not a fan of, but I just fell in love with the idea because just a style that is pleasing to look at, but is sharp and just it's menacing, it's scary, but it's pleasing, it's appealing.
Yeah.
And I love that style. It wasn't my style for a while, but once I got into it, I could not stop drawing like that.
I mean, I think the thing that works with, especially the way you're able to present your art or whatnot, is there are times where you can really amplify just the roughness and the jaggedness of it to emphasize more the horror aspect of it, like to really emphasize like the weird and creepy part. But then like in simpler scenes or whatnot, you can really tone it down and where the naturals more the shapes they more naturally like work with each other, almost like it's a puzzle in a way. Like kind of blend well to present kind of a like a universal feel of like everything all the same more or less like it's a good way to
Yeah.
where you can have like either a contraction or a objection or something along the lines of that when it comes to how you present your stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's just shapes can make things fit certain scenes.
Mm-hmm.
The more sharp the shape, the scarier or more intense it can be. The softer the shape, the more things just kind of slow down. And I like how that works. I've seen a lot of artists, and no offense to those artists, I see a lot of artists just kind of drawing the characters with no sense of purpose as to their posing or their shapes or their composition. And their art looks good, but there's just something about just mastering your use of shapes that just I love it a lot. I love that just sharp style because it can be so diverse.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like I said, it's especially really shown on full blast, especially with some of the scenes you've been able to showcase. I was gonna say, for me personally, I think the best way that I've been able to see so far, because there's plenty of times where I see how you're able to like really emphasize like more or less like the jaggedness or whatnot. My personal favorite one was during the first run of the haunted house or whatnot. You see that first couple going through, and there's that unique, almost like spiral motion where you have like all the different monsters, like almost like coming in around on the couple that you have as like the first one's going in there, like the different trails and such. Like I loved visually how that scene looked.
Oh yeah, that was one of my favorite pages to work on. I loved the aesthetic. Well, I loved being able to craft the composition of that because like a lot of that chapter was that was the first chapter where I was developing the idea of it is a haunted house.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to figure out how to convey that without it just being, oh, they're walking through, oh, spooky images. I wanted to convey it in just a really like out there way. I wanted to convey it in the sense of how it feels when you first walk through a haunted house in your own headspace. Not how it actually looks, but what your headspace is going through when you're walking through. Just it's very disorienting because it's dark, it's dimly lit, but there's just a lot going on. And if you're anxious or if you're scared, just all this stuff popping out at you and all these colors going on just disorient you and just kind of turn everything around. So that was a lot of what those pages were supposed to be mimicking, just that sense of disorientation when you're walking through a haunted house.
Absolutely. I mean, especially like I said, the way you more or less conveyed that with just that first go round, like that entire chapter alone or whatnot, you really put like you nailed it. Like you bullseye and everything, just how you're able to present that, getting that kind of feel to it, but also really emphasizing that like, hey, this is a horror comedy or whatnot. There's still fun elements to this kind of stuff. Like, how at the tail end of the chapter, you basically had the classic, all right, we're done for the night. Let's do a tradition. Everyone to the diner. Let's go. 2:00 in the morning, getting that, whatever greasy food we can get in our gullets.
Yeah, that was a big thing. I was like, I have to have this at the end of the chapter. This is like something, like, I had been planning for a bigger moment of these characters are leaving the asylum, because that was like something they had not done in decades. But I liked the idea that their first time out was just the main characters being like, Ash just being like, let's go to a diner.
Yeah.
And none of them objecting, because the idea of leaving was so enticing that it didn't care how big the moment was. It was them getting out like that, and Ash just being like, they're not considering the concept of what's going on, like how much this means to them. They're just like, this is a tradition. We're going now. We have to go.
Yeah, like getting however we get there does not matter. We're going there immediately. We're enjoying ourselves some delicious bacon, pancakes, wherever we can get our hands on or whatnot,
It feels very much like how I was when I was in like musical theater in high school. Just, we're done with the show. Time to go to the diner.
There you go. Absolutely. I was going to say, it reminded me of, so I'll preface this by saying that I'm a huge fan of WWE. So like wrestling and all that kind of stuff. And about this, like recently, like within the past, I want to say like 6 to 12 months, they introduced this group called the Wyatt Six. It's this like weird, like creepy, like based in horror characters or whatnot, like dressed up, face painted, all this kind of stuff or whatnot. Like when they made their debut, it was genuinely like almost like haunting and like scary the way they were able to present themselves. And then like that night there was a picture that was floating around on the internet of just like the 5 people that were dressed up, like just eating at a local diner with like a fan, like just taking a candid photo with that kind of stuff. And I think someone had even quote retweeted it being like, yep, I know exactly what it's like. This is the exact experience what it's like to be in musical theater more than anything else.
Yeah, no, that's basically it. I used to scare act for Halloween Horror Nights. Okay. And there's literally a whole thing where there are 2 separate places where people go after the event. There's a local dive bar called STP, and there's an IHOP right across the street from Universal that are basically just, that's where you go when the night's over. And I was very inspired by that. I was like, theater kids and then characters, they all have the same traditions, which is go eat some greasy food afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter how sick you are, doesn't matter how sweaty you are, food time.
Yep, food time. Absolutely. It does lead me to wonder because you have illustrated like a lot of really cool, interesting moments so far, a lot of really cool, interesting emotions at this point or whatnot. Do you personally have a favorite moment or a favorite part of what you've been able to present yours so far? Like, I imagine it's like picking your favorite child more than anything else because there's just so many good things, but there has
There's
to
a
be.
lot of great moments. Oh, that's a hard one actually, because like there's a lot of great expressive moments I've had. The third chapter, the one where they're first preparing, like they're doing auditions and all that, I loved getting to illustrate all of that because I loved how expressive I made everybody. Um, One of my recent chapters, chapter 7, which is where the characters Ash and Matilda go to a local, like Halloween themed pub that Ash frequents, and they start telling ghost stories. I loved that, and I loved getting to do a lot of expressions for that. But there was a lot of sentimental moments that I got to do in that one that I don't get to do a lot in the comic because it's very silly, it's very over the top. But seeing the more sentimental moments, the quieter moments, was very fun to do. I think I really liked chapter 7 because not only did each ghost story have like a different art style, but I liked getting to illustrate the characters reacting to these stories and reacting to each other, and kind of bouncing off each other. That was a lot of fun to do because as many characters as there is in Idlewood, not many of them interact because, it's a lot of characters to try and weave together.
Oh, yeah.
But having that thing where this small gaggle of people during a blackout just talk to each other was just a very fun experience to just create. It was one of the most difficult because there's just a lot of pages, a lot going on, because it's probably the longest chapter I've done so far.
Right.
It was fun because it was getting to bring these characters together and bring out sides of them that we have not seen so far. Like Matilda, which is the witch character in the comic, has only shown just anger and just displeasure with everything. She's a very cynical character, and her backstory, part of which has been revealed, kind of reveals why. She's traumatized. She's been through a lot. She's been stuck in this asylum for 15, 20 years. She's been stuck for so long that she's just traumatized. So yeah, she's distrusting, but there's just this moment where she's out. She's out of the asylum. She's with someone that she's starting to find trust with just a little bit. And you just see a softer side of her. She's kind of just wowed by everything. She's letting her guard down a little bit. And even if at the end of the chapter, which I'm not going to go into spoilers, if in case any of the listeners want to read it, at the end of the chapter, she starts to go back into that guarded sense, that sort of, she cares that she has a friend now, but it's not enough because so much has hurt her that she's not sure if a friend is enough for her. And I think getting to convey all that in the comic was really, really fun to do. I really liked getting to express these characters as like wants and desires and emotions in a really unconventional way by telling the ghost stories.
Yeah. I mean, on top of it being a nice little what's the word I'm looking for? Like homage to the classic scary stories to tell in the dark, book series or whatnot. It was a really cool way to like showcase more of the characters' dynamics a little bit more. Ones that we may not have thought about otherwise, considering how much of an emphasis we've had beforehand when it comes to like the monsters and such, and Ash and such. Like it was really cool to see that a little bit more, really get a good insight on their psyche, both before and during the storytelling part. Because I know exactly what you're talking about when it comes to like seeing Matilda almost soften up a little bit, especially when it came to like the little block party where you had like all the Halloween stuff and just realizing, oh, okay, this is they appreciate this kind of stuff. We're not just, horrible creatures that could absolutely destroy them, at least in this sense.
Absolutely. Like, it's a lot of that. It's a coming to terms with things not being as bad as they seemed, but still being guarded because, there's no other way to feel about it.
Whenever you're raised in a certain environment of trauma, that stuff isn't gonna go away in a snap. You know, that's not the storybook
Yeah.
ending right immediately.
Yeah, because a big concept of Idlewood was just so the whole story is literally just these creatures were taken from their homes and put in this secret facility that was meant to experiment on them and trap them because this mad doctor was like, I want to see what these things can do, what these things are. And he, in any other story, that sounds like, yeah, that's what you would do with a monster. But I'm playing it from the other angle where these are actual people.
Right.
Like, yes, they are creatures and all that, but they're people. They're actual sentient, caring people that had their own lives. And characters like Matilda and Mooney were taken from their homes as children. Like, they've spent their entire lives that they can remember being inside of this asylum, being experimented on. So it's hard for a lot of these characters to adapt, but different characters kind of are responding to this new situation in different ways. Like, one thing I'm going to be expressing a lot in this upcoming chapter, a little bit of a sneak peek, is Mooney's and Matilda's stories are very similar. They kind of went through the same thing, but like they were both kidnapped at the same age. They were both thrown in around the same time, about 5 years apart. But the only difference is Mooney kept holding out hope that things were going to get better. A lot of the aspect is Matilda wants to leave because she just cannot stay locked up anymore. Mooney's the same way, but she's seeing it as she's going to live her life. Matilda's haunted by her past while Mooney is looking to towards her future.
Right. Absolutely.
Just sort of, and I've illustrated in the comic that the two kind of hate each other. Like, Mooney is kind of like indifferent towards Matilda, but Matilda hates Mooney. And it's just a concept of they've both went through the same things, but I think it's a thing of Matilda just doesn't understand why Mooney is okay with everything, why she's doing better than her. And I like illustrating that aspect, just how trauma affects different people and how different people live through it.
Absolutely. And I sincerely hope that people, if they have not taken the opportunity beforehand to read this fantastic comic, well beforehand or whatnot, take the opportunity to see that kind of stuff, especially as Sky, continues to develop it more and such, and really showcase more of that dynamic. Like, I can only imagine with what you have possibly planned or whatnot, because again, like, at this point you've already done 7 amazing chapters when it comes to this, currently working on the 8th. Lord knows how much more you have left to tell this.
I'm working on the 9th.
Oh, sorry, how rude of me to assume.
It's okay, it's fine.
Okay, fine, let me you already have 7 now. 8's just around the corner, and Lord knows how much more left you have to tell this story, but at least for the people that want to dive into this series, especially if this interview alone convinces them to do so, how would you want to like mentally like what can you say to them that if they're not already convinced, like to make them like want to flock to this series and check it out? What should they expect? There you go. That's where I'm supposed to...
I would say if you are a fan of like just Halloween, if you're a fan of classic horror movies, of horror comedies, if you are a fan of queer storytelling, I think this is the one for you, because this is very much traditional Halloween, classic Universal horror movies, colorful and just fun and over the top with queer elements that has its dramatic storytelling, but it's still just fun across the board. It's just fun to read. I don't want to toot my own horn, but it is just a fun, over the top story that handles its themes appropriately, but is still just a fun, spooky little story to read. It might not be like life-changing, but there are some people that have read the story that I've seen their comments and I'm like, wow, because like there's people that have said that they read it with their family, and every new update they read it with their family. There was someone, the character Sangwa speaks Romanian because he's from Transylvania, and I want to represent that culture. I had someone who's Romanian comment on the comic and say, I feel seen with this character speaking my language and speaking it so well. I love getting to see this. I like getting to represent people, and I like getting to represent all different cultures and like different groups and all that through this spooky little story that will hopefully let everyone be seen, but like, and get a little scared too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know with my personal experience, like reading through it or whatnot, I like, on top of being just enamored by the art style alone, I love the dynamics. I love how much more of the characters we get to see as the pages progress. I love how intertwined that I'm starting to feel like with these characters, how much I'm starting to sympathize a lot more and really see their story like through, rooting for them more and more every single time I turn a page more than anything else. I mean, I've already showered enough praise as it is when it comes to how much I've loved the dynamics alone or whatnot, but like, with this new chapter, I'm interested to see more when it comes to Mooney stuff, and how much more we get to possibly explore when it comes to her or whatnot. If nothing else, I definitely want to see more of her and Giggles, because I love Giggles. Like, just
Oh, yeah. I will let you know that this next chapter is very heavy on the Giggles and Mooney storyline. It is very much it is going to be a scarier story. It is going to allow for scarier moments, but it is definitely going to be a very, very queer little story. It is going to be for all of the women shippers out there. That one is going to be for you.
There you go. That's a good thing. That if nothing else, if that doesn't entice you, I don't know what else will. Okay, you guys need to read this story genuinely. I I in just a little bit I have been able to absorb, but I already can't get enough, and I'm eagerly waiting for whatever may be next when it comes to this story. I will also say it does leave me interested to see what else you're going to be possibly able to present out there soon enough. I know one of the concepts that you've been teasing, because I know you said earlier that you have a lot of creative concepts that you're ready to just unleash onto the world. One of the ones that you may have let us a little bit more in on than others is this unique concept called demonic imagery.
Yeah.
Now, people have no clue what in the world I am talking about. What is demonic imagery?
It's a concept I've been working on for a few months. It's a very mid 2000s inspired story where it's going to be about two hot topic emo scene kids accidentally summoning Satan and trapping him within like a hot topic teddy bear, and basically having to face off against the forces of hell as they all come towards, like, to get their leader, their boss or whatever. And it's just these two kind of awkward, very edgy little emo teens just trying their best to get out of the situation alive. It's a fun little concept that I'm basically going to be infusing a lot of like scene and emo culture into that, but I also want to infuse the culture of like classic teen movies like Superbad and Not Another Teen Movie and 16 Candles and all that. Infuse that with basically the aesthetics of Evil Dead. Basically allow Evil Dead creatures onto like a teen movie.
That alone, I was already sold just based on the little bits I have been able to see, but you have me hook, line, and sinker for this bad boy, all right? Like, that just sounds fun more than anything else. Like, first off, how can you not love the idea of Satan being contained in a simple teddy bear? Like, that alone is just seeing the antics and just... It reminds me of that classic Vine. I don't know why it made me think of this, but it reminded me of the Vine that's just like, hey, what do you want to eat? The souls of the innocent. A bagel. No, 2 bagels. Like, it has that vibe more than anything else when I think of that alone.
Oh, yeah. It's very much supposed to be that sort of vibe. It's very much going to be also a horror comedy, but kind of aiming in a different direction where I think it's going to be a little more cynical than Idlewood, simply because that's how teen movies were.
Right.
Teen movies and Evil Dead were just very cynical in their approach. So is like emo culture and all that. It's very cynical and all that. So I want to be cynical, but in a funny way, where these characters are so cynical to their situation, and it's just getting worse.
Yep.
And then they're like, "This sucks." But like, I like the idea that it's just this completely unbelievable situation that's just covered in blood and gore, and they're like, "Man, this sucks. I hate this." It's like, yeah. They're giving more. They're giving their edgy little reactions as if like they're literally having something trying to eat them, and they're trying to put a knife to its throat, and they're like, man, why do I have to do this? Like, man, this sucks.
It's just straight up like I can't deal with this anymore, Mom. Like this is just getting ridiculous. I chime in with the haven't you people ever heard? Like it's that.
That is exactly the vibe. I like just the characters coming in blood, parents seeing them like, what were you out doing? Were you demon hunting again? And they're like, it's not a phase. It's a lifestyle. Demon hunting is a lifestyle.
Were you demon hunting again? Back off, Mom. It's okay. Did I die?
Yeah,
No.
That's very much what I'm going for with it. Just a lot of fun just playing off of the dynamics of that. And I want like the whole dynamic of, oh, the jock, the cheerleader, the stoner, all that. They're all just characters in there. But they're more just kind of background characters to the emo kid's story. Like they're just kind of along for the ride. They're like, what did you do? And they're like, don't worry about it, okay? Can you calm down?
Exactly, and I love with what little hints we have been able to give this so far. Like you kind of emphasize this by saying that this is a more of like a mid 2000s emo kind of vibe, more or less. But like that's not only told with like the storytelling you've been able to tease, but also like the art style, how much you're really leaning more into that like punk aesthetic with how you're able to present this stuff. Like I love the like if Idlewood was a style I love, I'm already craving more of the demonic imagery style with what you got set up for that.
I'm definitely going to try and aim towards getting more of it out. Like, I'm writing more of the story, developing it like I did with Idlewood. It's going to be a while before that comes out, but I'm hoping to see it come out maybe next year or something, at least get a start. Because, like, I'd like to develop these characters more. I've been having a lot of fun, like, illustrating it and creating it. It's different than Idlewood. Idlewood's definitely aiming more towards a classic Halloween monsters vibe. This is definitely aiming more towards a something you would see on the shelves of Hot Topic back in 2007. It is a very much a period piece than anything. It is, while if Idlewood is a tribute to Halloween, this is a tribute just to 2000s culture. Just not even just emo culture, just 2000s in general. Just the cringy vibes of it all, classic memes, just all of it. Love it. I'm a big fan of it, and I want it to be represented in the worst way possible.
Well, I think you're already off to a good start just with what you've been able to present and what you've been able to chat about here so far. Like it's really cool. Like if that's just like the tip of the iceberg where it comes to that concept, and especially with what we've been able to see with Idlewood, like it's really cool. Like how much you've put into this stuff and how much you've been able to put out there. And I can only imagine, like, especially like you had said, you know, especially seeing people's reactions to like Idlewood and how people felt like represented. Like it has to be cool in a sense to see just how many people have also seen this kind of stuff and have been on board and want to see more of it. Like the community you've been able to build at this point, like it's actually really impressive given all things considered. Like I imagine for you it's got to be surreal thinking, oh wait, there's people that actually want to see this stuff. What? Huh?
Yeah, no, it's bizarre because it was back when I was making the animated series. I was like, no one's watching this, and then I got to Idlewood, and people were responding on Webtoon, and they were like attached to the characters. I had people actively talking about their favorite ships and all that, and I'm like, y'all were paying that much attention to it?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's the biggest thing. Just seeing how people like the dynamics. They're like, oh, I love this ship. They're shipping characters that I didn't even ship, and I'm like, what? I wasn't even paying that much attention to it. What are you guys seeing that I'm not? Like, I think somewhere on like Twitter, someone was like shipping Mooney and Sanguis, and I was like, well, respectfully, she's a lesbian,
Yeah.
but also I can see why you would say that. But also, she's gay.
Yeah. They're lesbians, Tom. No. I think they like I can kind of understand because I believe they were like two of the first characters that we were like really introduced to, and seeing kind of like the friendship
Oh,
they kind of had with each other or whatnot.
yeah,
Um,
but they're very much designed to be like best friends. They're designed to like bounce off of each other a lot and to share the same. They're sharing the same brain cell at all times. Like it is always a question of who has the brain cell at the moment.
yep. They're two people fighting for a brain cell, and somehow one of them ends up in third place. Um,
It's also all very fun to see what everyone's favorite characters are
yep.
because everyone has different favorite characters that sometimes I'm like, oh, that's interesting. A lot of people really seem to love Sanguis, and I'm like, Mooney's right there, but okay. No, people love Sanguis. People love like Carver, who's Ash's ex in the story. There are people that love like Dave and Luther, who is one is an immortal chainsaw wielder, while the other is like a Frankenstein's monster, and they're dating in the story. People love them, and I'm like, this is really nice to see that the main people I draw are not the only ones that are liked. Like these more side characters that just kind of have their own little stories going on are really well loved by the people that read it, and I genuinely love that.
I was gonna say, if you hadn't mentioned it, like Dave and Luther, if I was gonna name my favorite ship, that's my favorite ship so far. Just like the two chaotic, like bumbling idiots, more or less, at this point.
Yeah, I was very much writing them as disaster gays.
There
just,
you go.
they are two bears that are just in love, and that's the story. But no, I love hearing people's favorite ships, favorite characters. It makes me feel like an actual real creator.
What do you mean makes you feel? You are an actual real creator. You've created this. You've developed this. You are a creator. Point, period, punctuation mark, no other notes.
I know your favorite ship, but what's your favorite character in Idlewood? I gotta test your knowledge.
I said it, Giggles.
Oh,
yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
We barely seen. I also think that's funny because we barely seen Giggles and what she's capable of, because she's going to get a lot of time in the next chapter. It's very much a Mooney chapter, but she's very well represented. Like her funny moments, her sad moments, her self is going to be represented in really interesting ways. And you're probably one of the first people I've actually heard say that Giggles is someone's favorite. So I'm like, good. She deserves her time in the sun. Fun fact, she is one of the few girl characters that is actually trans.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that.
Because there are like non-binary characters and all that, but this is like the one character in the cast that is like outright like a trans girl. And I like her a lot, and no one ever talks about her, and she deserves her due, but everyone is being transphobic. Love my little clown girl, okay? Can you be nice to her? She deserves the world.
I mean, if nothing else, the fact that they themselves are a shapeshifter. I am always a sucker for like the shapeshifter aspect, but the form that they feel the most comfortable in is this unique, creepy clown form. Like, how can you not love that? You know?
Yeah, no, I it's very much a Pennywise sort of situation, but also like the difference between her and Pennywise is she didn't want to be just a regular creepy clown. She wanted to be a hot girl creepy clown.
There you go.
She was like that was one thing I was like, one thing that is like a big in like the trans community is, oh, if we could shapeshift, would we shapeshift into like a cis woman? And I like the idea that Giggles is a shapeshifter, and that's what she did. She was like, I can do whatever I want. This is my life. So she just shapeshifts immediately into a hot girl. That she has a bit of a different taste as to what hot means. So she goes into hot clown with sharp teeth that sometimes just kind of malforms a little bit. But as it turns out, Mooney thinks the same thing. She's like, damn, go you.
Like, I think that was part of the thing that more or less like sold me on Giggles, is like that when Mooney is just like all blushing and like flustered, being like, hey, so you know, you and I or whatnot, and then like chaos happens, and then Giggles just confident be like, whatever you're gonna say, the answer is yes. Like, just blunt, simple, to the point. I love that.
Yeah, no, I think the idea that I like the idea that with Giggles specifically, social anxiety is afraid of her. Like she like Mooney is very much not a socially anxious character. But like if she's around a pretty girl, she's gay.
Yeah.
She's gonna have trouble around that. Giggles is just there's the concept of social anxiety does not occur to her. She doesn't know what that is. She doesn't know what being ashamed of herself is. She's a weird queer little clown that has no interest in anything else. It's just do.
Yep.
That's it. No thought, just do.
Head empty,
Um,
just go. All gas, no brakes.
that's very similar to Mooney's dynamic, except I think Mooney just kind of has certain trauma aspects that just hold her back a little bit.
Okay.
And I think this next chapter is definitely going to open her up a little bit more to the idea. I think it's a thing of she's very personable, she's very friendly, but when it comes to finding her actual future, it's a little scary for her. And I think this next chapter will help push her in the right direction. And I'm hoping we're going to get there's some chapters coming up soon that's going to hopefully push Matilda in the right direction too. Hopefully help her heal a little bit.
There you go. I know I'm certainly going to be excited to see what you have going on next and what you're going to be presenting for, because at this point, like with what you have been able to do, like it's been really impressive. Like for you, I can only imagine, like just thinking back all the way to whenever you were that young kid, watching those weird, obscure, cartoons and such, and really absorbing that, to here you are right now presenting this incredible story with this unique art style and all sorts of stuff like that. Like thinking to your growth as an artist alone, does it surprise you more or less how much you've been able to develop as an artist and frankly as a person?
It's very much very crazy to think about because like back then all I saw was just these amazing artists and thinking I want to do that, but like what's the likelihood? I think if younger me saw what I was doing now, I think she would have loved it, but also she might have been a little surprised because she'd be like, why are you a girl now? And it's a whole thing of she'd be like, wow, this is a really good read. Who wrote it? Who are you? It's definitely weird to think about because like this is definitely the kind of thing I would have eaten up in high school. Like in high school, I would have gone crazy for Idlewood. And thinking now that I'm creating something like that, creating something that's my aesthetic, that's my ideas, it's really fun. I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's definitely fun to develop stories and actually being able to do something with them, unlike back then where I was just trying.
Well, I mean, you say trying, but obviously we all had to start somewhere, and seeing where you were back then to here you are right now, I mean, it was worth the shot. It was worth trying because it's not like you really stopped. You just applied it in a different direction, and here you are
Yeah.
now. Um,
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun to be able to do this. Like hearing people like the stuff is one thing, but me liking my own stuff is another thing.
nice.
It's nice to like what I'm making. It's nice to like my characters. It's nice to feel love towards what I'm illustrating and all that. I'm having a lot of fun doing it, and I definitely hope to do more of it soon. I want to create more stories. I want to illustrate more comics. I want to create more things just because all I think about in my day-to-day life when I'm working or when I'm asleep or when I'm doing anything is just the next thing I'm going to create.
Well, if I may, for this next question, what if I can give you the opportunity to create the next however many things and give you more or less the dream scenario? let's say I am Big Shot Mr. Moneybags. I come up to you and I'm like, look, Sky, we have seen what you've been able to present, and we cannot get enough of it. We rock with the edgy style, right? Like party on and all that stuff. But we think there is more there. We know that there is something else that can be cultivated from this incredible creative space that you developed for yourselves. You just need a little extra push, a little extra platform to get you to that point. We have access to everyone and anyone in whatever industry possible, and more money than should be possible. We really should be, reinforcing the animators to make sure that they get all the stuff that they need, like healthcare, a place to live, all that kind of stuff like that. We'll focus on them in a little bit. We promise. We will focus on them in a little bit. But right now, we're focusing on you and you alone. If given this opportunity, what would be the dream SkellyBonesArt project?
There are a few stories I've been developing for a very long time.
Okay.
Like Idlewood, it'd be very fun to have like an Idlewood animated series or whatever.
Okay.
It'd be fun to do that. But I think an animated movie inspired by like either an animated movie or a specific graphic novel, because I've had a specific idea that I've been workshopping for years, even before Idlewood, that either as a graphic novel or as a movie, I would like made. It is another horror comedy concept, but it is like my baby. Like it is like my concept, like something I have fallen in love with and I have been tooling with and workshopping it for nearly a decade now.
Okay.
It is a concept called The Worst People,
okay.
and it is about three very pessimistic, very unlikable people finding out that in this happy-go-lucky town that they've moved to, the big people in their life, the happy-go-lucky people in their life, whether it be roommates or a girl at school or the mayor of the town, all turn out to be serial killers that are killing the people that are unhappy to keep the town happy. So they have to start hiding in plain sight and pretending like they're happy to avoid being killed. It's a concept I was working on for a very long time, which is just this weird sort of concept where it's these genuinely terrible people finding out that the seemingly well-doing people around them are worse than they are, and they have to try and blend in with them to avoid getting caught. And then they start to develop more as characters, but it's hard for them because they're all really cynical, jerky people that just do not care about anyone else. And I like I've been working with that concept for a very, very long time, for 10 years now. It's a really like close to my heart concept that I've been working on. And if I had like the big shot, it would either to fully develop that as like a full graphic novel, like a 450 page graphic novel, like a full graphic novel, or develop as like a movie. I'd always imagine that concept being like a musical film.
Okay. No, honestly, the more you keep talking about this kind of stuff, like the more excited I am. All right, just thinking about like the dynamic alone of trying to be happy go lucky, here we go, I'm fucked if I look sad and depressed like that.
Yeah, no, that's very much it. Just really miserable people that just really gotta act their ass off just to get out of this.
Literally fake it till you make it.
Yeah, and I like the concept of just the juxtaposition of these very happy-go-lucky people, flowers everywhere, smiles everywhere, big, brilliant colors everywhere, and then it just gets splattered in blood because these characters are a lot more sadistic than they let on.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of thing of forced happiness and all that, like day-to-day life of. It's again like the concept of in today's society, it's easier to stay in the closet. It's easier to do all that. It's easier to pretend to get by. And that's a lot of the concept, but taking it to its extreme. Instead of being like, oh, you have to stay in the closet so your parents don't get mad at you or so the government doesn't get mad at you. It's instead, you have to pretend to be happy so these people that want you to be happy but don't really care why, so they don't kill you. So they don't actually physically murder you. It's just playing into the concept of pretending to be something you're not just for your own personal gain. And it can be selfish, but sometimes it's necessary. And I love the concept because I love the juxtaposition. There are certain comics that I love that same, like the one comic that inspired that was I Hate Fairyland,
Okay.
which is a really colorful yet really gory comic that I love a lot. And I just love the juxtaposition of these bright, colorful characters and creatures and all that, and these bright settings, and then just juxtaposed with just carnage. Most of my stories are not very like carnage inspired. They're not very bloody or gory. But like that's the one where I'm like, I would go all out with that one.
That's the one where you're just like, let's just have a little fun. Let's just talk. Let's have a little fun.
Let's have a little fun. Yeah, no, that's probably the one I'd be like, that is like what I want to develop. I want, if you can let me make that into like a long ass graphic novel and I have to do nothing else but work on that graphic novel, I'll be happy. Give me a year to just work on that, a year or two just to work on that graphic novel. I don't have to do anything, like do a job or anything. That would make me happy because that is the story I'd like to tell.
I would, honestly, that is money very much well spent. I'm already thinking of like, I don't know if you already have a title in mind for this story, but I'm already thinking of like 3 right off the top of my head. The Happy-Go-Luckies, Fake It Till You Make It, Paint the Town Red. Like, any one of those would be great.
One of my working titles is The Worst People.
Okay, yeah, no, honestly, that's valid. That's a good one as well.
It's very much just a pointed statement about what all the characters think of each other. That all the characters think that the others are worse than they are. Like the happy-go-lucky characters, they think that the very pessimistic people are worse than they are, and they don't really deserve to live. While the pessimistic people are like, "You're killing people.
Yeah.
You're a bad person," and it's just them kind of having different viewpoints of who's worse than the other.
It's literally like the two sides of the fence. Oh, you're like your depressive state, like it's really just like bumming my vibe. Like I'm just not vibing with it. You're literally killing people.
No, that is 100% like what this is. Like very much a concept of two sides having very different viewpoints, but one's being a little more extreme than the other.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, like I said, the money we'll put in your bank account sometime within the next week. Like, you get started on that, please. But sadly, we got to get down from the dream scenario. We got to get back to reality. I know, it sucks. And I'll ask the ever so generic question. Where do you hope to see yourself in, say, 5 to 10 years from now?
I hope to see myself still doing what I'm doing. I'd like to be able to move on from a full-time job and all that and just focus on illustration. I know it's going to take a while because art is very hard to do.
Yes, it is.
But I hope to see in 5 to 10 years me working full-time as an artist, working full-time as a comic writer and illustrator, working full-time as just a regular illustrator, doing freelance work and all that. I want to see me publish my first graphic novel. Like, I don't want to just only do webcomics. I want to publish a graphic novel, if not several. I want to just spend my life making comics. And if in 5 to 10 years I can see myself having a book or 2 out, I'd be happy.
I mean, I think easily, hell, within the next year, if you really wanted to, you could take what you've already got from Idlewood Asylum alone and make that like a part 1 of a 2-part graphic novel, if you really wanted to.
I have planned on it because I will say Idlewood has a lot more to go.
Yep.
Idlewood is going to be split into several arcs, and we are only on the first arc right now.
Okay.
Each arc's going to be is planned to be around 13 chapters, so we're getting about 3 arcs. So, however many chapters, 39? That's 39.
Yep.
39 chapters. That is my limit for about how I'm going to go with this. And I've thought about just separating the arcs into different graphic novels.
Well,
I'm thinking about self-publishing, but like I'd like to do like an actually like publisher-published graphic novel someday, so I can say like I have my book on a shelf. I want my book to be found in like a bookstore.
Yeah.
I want to be like, physical print is not dead. I see my book on a shelf. Whether anyone's gonna not, that's to be seen. But I want a book.
I'd buy it. I'd buy it in a heartbeat. Don't tempt me. It's not, um, no, I mean honestly, that I can easily see within the next 5 to 10 years. That could easily be accomplishable. I think you could absolutely get that done. I believe in you.
Thank you.
Oh no, absolutely. As we start to wind down the episode, I just have one last question I want to ask you. Obviously, you are deeply entrenched in art at this point, like with how much you've devoted to it, how much has been a part of your life for as long as you can remember. How important is art, not just for you, but for the world as a whole?
I think art is the biggest expression you can have. Like, art isn't just drawing or painting, it's singing, it's theater, it's architecture, it's advertisement, it's movies, it's TV shows, it's books. Everything is art. We would not have the world we have today without art, without design, without creativity. I think if we keep going down the rabbit hole of like AI and all that, we're going to start to lose what's integral to our society, which is passion, which is creativity, which is development. I think if we lose passion, then we lose everything. We're already losing everything, but if we lose our passion, if we lose our creativity, then what else do we have?
Absolutely. I think that is wonderfully worded, if I do say so myself. Um, Sky, that is all the questions that I have for you. I've already showered you with Lord knows how much praise at this point, but I'll shower you a little bit more because it's my podcast. I do what I want. Um, Look, Sky, I know I've only gotten a chance to be familiar with your stuff for about a week at the time that we're recording this or whatnot, but honestly, like, I felt like if I had learned about yourself sooner, I would have been, like, rooting for you day one with what you've been able to present. Like I said before, I was sold immediately by the art style because I'm a huge fan of that, like, the grungy, like, the rough look, more or less, like, with what you're able to present. But, like, the way you've been able to use that as part of your storytelling technique with Idlewood and with the art you have been able to present, like it makes me love and appreciate like what you're able to do so much more. Like I cannot get enough of what you've been able to present, and it makes me excited for whatever may come next. Whether it be with Idlewood, whether it be with demonic imagery, whether it be with the worst people, or hell, for all you know, you could be given the opportunity to make like a horror comedy animated film based off of Beetlejuice or something like that. I'd be hyped as hell to get out for that kind of stuff. I know that alone would probably be just like, pie in the sky.
Love to.
Yeah, exactly. But like whatever may come next for you, like I'm gonna be amped for it because with what you've been able to present so far, if people are not already hopping on board and like checking out what you've got to present to the world, like they need to. They are genuinely missing out on a truly incredible and talented artist such as yourself and a great storyteller as well. Like I genuinely think people need to take the opportunity to take the time and like truly absorb yourself, because if this is what you've only been able to do in a relatively short amount of time, a couple of years when it comes to the story of Idlewood or whatnot, Lord knows what you're going to be able to do in the next 5, 10, 20, 50 years from now, because it could be absolutely outstanding, and I cannot wait for that. The long and the short of it is, at the end of the day, thank you for what you do. Thank you for putting yourself out there, because I know it's not the easiest thing to do, to really like put all of yourself out there in these fun stories. But like, I really do love and appreciate the fact that you want to take the time to really tell that story, to let that creativity flow, because it is certainly seen in everything that you do. And that's why I'm going to be rooting for you every single step of the way with whatever you got going on next. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much. That actually really means a lot.
Absolutely. Trust me, I speak nothing but truth on this podcast, okay? And besides, like, I already got you here. We've already recorded the entire episode. Why would I just inflate your ego just to inflate your ego, Like, I'm being genuine. Like, you're a really talented person, and I think people need to love and see that more, like, genuinely. So, I'm hoping this episode does a little bit of that, but, like, also, like, I'm gonna promote the living hell that I can out of you even well after this episode goes out there to the world, okay? So
I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
Absolutely. Now people want to know why I've been gushing about your art and your story and all this kind of stuff like that. Go ahead and plug your stuff for the people at home.
If you want to follow me on Tumblr, Instagram, Blue Sky, or Twitter, you can follow me at SkellyBonesArt. And if you want to read Idlewood Asylum, you can read it at Webtoon, Tapas, or Comic Fury. We're about 8 chapters in. It's on hiatus right now, but I'm hoping to get more out soon. I'm currently writing and illustrating the next chapter, so hopefully we'll see more of that soon. But yeah, just follow me there and you'll see everything I'm putting together.
Absolutely. I'll be sure to have all those links and then some in the description below, so I got you covered there.
Thank you.
Do you have any final words before we sign off?
No.
Tell me what's wrong, tell me its parts in motion. Sing me a song, tell me your eyes can all open. Show me it all, pick me up in the car you drove when you used to call. Show me it all.
Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. If this is your first time listening, I greatly do appreciate it. Like I said in the intro, just by the art style alone, I was absolutely amazed with what Sky had to present, but getting the chance to talk to her and actually getting the chance to explore her stuff, like, it was phenomenal. Sky, if you've gotten up to this point, thank you. Sincerely, thank you for your time, and thank you for providing a fun story. Especially in this time. If you guys haven't had a chance to check out the webcomic beforehand, I highly recommend you do, because ironically enough, given kind of the situations that we've had due to recent events in life, I feel like it's a bit ironic, or at least a bit relatable. Regardless, it's a good read, and genuinely, if you guys have not taken the opportunity to check out Idlewood Asylum, please do. If nothing else, the art style alone is absolutely stunning, and the stories and the characters are just so phenomenal. It's absolutely amazing, and I hope you guys are able to take away something from it. Oh yeah, a little bit of a housekeeping thing. I'm gonna be going on a little bit of a break. I'm going on vacation. Me and a good group of friends and my girlfriend. We're going down to Florida. Part of it to go to MegaCon, so if you guys are going there, I hope to see you guys there. And part of it just to enjoy stuff like Disney and stuff. But with that in mind, there's going to be no episode next week or the week after, but there will be an episode dropping on Indie Animation Day as my one commitment. Plus, I might be able to whip something up to where I might be able to get a bonus episode out for you guys during that little period, but just, no new episodes for at least the next 2 Thursdays. Honestly, given how hectic and everything is or whatnot, me and everyone that's involved, it's we need a vacation. I'm going with the same group or a lot of the same group, plus a few more that I went to MomoCon with, so it should be fun. I might be able to get some stuff filmed and some bonus stuff for you guys. If nothing else, just keep up with me on the socials and you'll see what's up. But past that, all I just want to say for you guys is, at the end of the day, given everything that is going on, please be good to yourselves. Treat yourselves well. Treat yourselves nice. Don't beat yourselves up, and don't be too harsh on yourselves. You guys are fantastic. You guys are amazing. You guys deserve everything. So please be good to yourselves.